Hello grade 10s. In a moment we will be joining Lebo as she continues her data handling journey. Lebo has been gathering data about her classmates' monthly allowance and spending habits so that she can justify an increase in her monthly allowance. She asked her teacher for assistance in displaying her personal budget on a pie chart. Let's join them now.
I thought of drawing a graph to represent the amounts I've budgeted for and how I've spent my money over the last 2 months. I know you get pie charts, bar graphs, and line graphs. Which type of graph would be best to use?
Representing your information in different ways is a good idea, and many types are used in everyday situations. Graphs are very useful to show data, especially if there is lots of data. Graphs are also good for making comparisons between different groups. A pie chart shows how parts of a whole are divided up into different categories. I suggest you use a pie chart to show how you've allocated different amounts of money into the categories you chose. Do you think you can convert the table of values in your book into a pie chart?
I think so. I've got paper and a mat set. I know that a pie chart is drawn as a circle to represent a whole, and the segments represent how the whole is divided up. If I get an allowance of 120 Rand, then the whole circle represents 120 Rand. If I were to allocate 30 Rand to tuck and snacks, this segment would represent that.
You are on the right track. But how do you calculate the size of that segment?
In this example, it's easy. The whole circle represents 120 Rand, and half the circle would represent 60 Rand, and a quarter, 30.
So far, so good. How can you be sure that you've drawn a segment that is exactly 1/4 of the whole circle?
Actually, I was just going to draw in a line to make it look like a quarter. If I had to draw it accurately, I'd have to use my protractor.
Yes, this protractor only shows half a circle. The half a circle is divided into 180 equal parts. Each one of these small markings is 1 degree. A whole circle can be divided into 360 degrees. We use the protractor to measure the angle between the first line and the second line of a segment.
Mrs. M, the segment that you've drawn doesn't represent exactly a quarter of a whole. Look, if I wanted to measure exactly a quarter of a circle, I'd have to divide 180 by 2 and then draw in exactly 90 degrees between the two segments. This segment is exactly a quarter and accurately represents 30 Rand that I've allocated for tuck and snacks out of the 120 Rand whole.
Can you see that 30 out of 120 and 90 out of 360 are both equal fractions, and they both represent 1/4.
That's helped me answer my next question, which is how to draw an accurate segment to represent 50 Rand for entertainment. I was just going to approximate the size of the segment and make it bigger than a quarter. I guess I better use a calculator to work out what the fraction of 50 divided by 120 is. Please may I use the calculator? The answer is 0,416 recurring.
Well done. How do you use this decimal fraction to work out the size of the angle?
I think it will help to write down the two fractions that I need. I want these fractions to be equal, but I'm not sure about this number, the size of the angle. Can I multiply both sides of this equation by 360 to get the size of the angle on its own?
Keep going.
That gives me an angle of 150 degrees. To draw this on my pie chart, I'll place my protractor on the second line of the first segment and measure 150 degrees.
You've got the right idea, but you could be making an error in reading off the values. Rather turn your page around to make sure that you can read the angles accurately.
Thanks. That helps. It's quite easy to work out the size of the next segment as well. I've allocated 20 Rand to gifts and 20 Rand to savings. To work out the size of an angle, I need to calculate the size of the fraction 20 Rand out of 120 Rand. And then multiply by 360, which gives me 60 degrees each. Is that correct?
Your calculations are spot on. Now all you need to do is make sure that you measured accurately. Use the protractor to measure the size of the segment you have left over. Because you have worked accurately, you can complete the pie chart by drawing in a line at 60 degrees and marking off 2 segments.
I do like my pie chart. It shows exactly how I've allocated my money to different areas of my budget.
As it stands at the moment, it gives you a clear picture of how you've divided up your money. But to anyone else, it doesn't say much at all. A very important part of any graph are labels and headings. Write in your heading here. On a pie chart, each of the segments is shaded or colored in differently. A key on the side of the chart indicates what each segment represents, or each segment can be labeled. When someone wants to draw your attention to a particular segment, they draw the pie chart with one of the segments removed. This is a very useful way to compare one segment to the whole.
A pie chart is certainly a very helpful way of representing data.
Lebo went through all the steps required for drawing a pie chart. As you know, a pie chart is an excellent way to represent parts of a whole. For that reason, a whole lot of work is done in fractions. Fractions either represent parts of a whole or parts of a set. The numerator or the top number represents the number of parts you have out of the total number of parts, which is represented by the denominator. The denominator is the number at the bottom of the fraction. In this example, we have 4 parts of a whole, which has been divided up into 8 parts. If we show this visually, you will see that 4/8 has the same value as a half. These fractions are called equivalent fractions. To interpret a pie chart's data, you need to be able to change fractions to their equivalent. Let's take a look at a pie chart. The heading reads, "How Mark Spends His Day." This tells us that the pie chart represents the amount of time spent on each activity in Mark's day. I want you to think about this for a moment. What is the logical number of parts in a day? 24 is the number of hours in one day, so let's say that Mark's day was divided into 24 parts. Let's look at how much of Mark's day is spent at school. From the key, we can see that this quarter segment represents the time spent at school. We can now change 1/4 to an equivalent fraction over 24 because there are 24 parts to a day. In order to change 4 to 24, we need to multiply 4 by 6. This means we will multiply the numerator of 1 by 6 as well, giving us a fraction of 6/24. This means Mark spends 6 hours at school. In this example, we changed the fraction to be over a denominator of 24, but we could have changed it to anything to suit the question. If the question asked, "How many minutes did Mark spend sleeping?" the denominator would need to be 1,440 because that's how many minutes there are in a day. So to change this 1/3 to minutes, we would multiply the fraction by 480 in the numerator and denominator. The answer for that question is, Mark spent 480 minutes sleeping. Thank you for joining us, grade 10s. You will find a task that practices using pie charts in the data handling task video. You will also be able to learn more about data handling on our website, www.mindset.co.za/learn. Goodbye.